Tom Zownir.
When did you get hired at MCC?
Summer of 1977 to start that fall.
How did you hear about the college?
Saw job listings in one of the journals, and I was over in Rhode Island. I had finished my master's at URI, had spent a year teaching part-time for them and several other venues around the state. Gasoline was cheaper, but the car was taking a lot of sweat, and when I saw the listing for the community colleges in Connecticut, I thought that could be a neat idea. It was what I wanted to do, too. So,
do you remember your impression when you arrived on campus for the first time for your interview?
I almost didn't make it to the interview because I did my usual thing. I go to things early in this world, and I got into town in plenty of time to find out where I was going and have a little brunch and then go to the interview. And I saw a building on Hartford Road that said Manchester Community College on it. I was a little surprised it was that small, but I said, I know where I'm going. I went to Main Street, Manchester. It might have been the Brass Key, to sit down and have some lunch. Fortunately, started talking with some of the folks there and found out that, there's a bigger campus about a mile down the road. That's just the building they rent for some of the classes that are not held on the main campus. I think I slammed down $10, didn't wait for the change on the check, sped down the road, found where on campus I was supposed to be, and fortunately I was not sweating too much, and the interview went well, and I'm still here.
Do you remember any of the people on the search committee?
This was the days before we did searches in the fashion we do now. So basically the search committee consisted simply of the division director of math science and allied health, since my field is chemistry. That was Mario Fiandella or Mark Fonda, depending on what he was named as at the time. Connie Quinlan was the full-time chemistry professor aboard. George Christensen, who was the division assistant director, because we had them at the time, might have sat in on it. But it was very informal. It was relatively short. None of the structured type interview that we do now with the questions asked the same of each candidate. So it was a very, very different interviewing process. Bob Fenn was the dean at the time. I think they might have had me say hello to Bob that day, and that was about it. And then, fortunately, I got a call a couple of weeks later, as it turned out.
What was the college like in the late 70s when you began?
Well, physically, we had a couple of these outlier buildings that we would use. The one down Hartford Road that I went to first. At the time, we had all of the classes in the temporary buildings. This being 1977, I believe those temporary buildings were less than 10 years old at that point, designed to last a few years longer. It turned out to be a little longer than that. Before the first of the new constructions, the low building, came into play. Even at that, many of us were down on the other end of campus for a good 10 years or so, I believe, beyond that. And so the temporary buildings that we had down there was my home for the first 27 years or so, I think, of my experience at the college, which is now 34 years. When they demolished them, I got there at the 11th hour, and I'm still trying to find the time to refurbish the signs that were on the side of the building from Faculty East and Faculty West, where I spent a lot of my early part of my career.
So you actually had
I went in the rubble, and just as the thing was coming along, I pulled them out from in front of the plow. And I still haven't. I've still got to do the refinishing on them, but when I get some time.
Who were some of the people who were instrumental or helpful to you in those days?
We had some giants in the early days of the college, so some real pioneers and some real visionaries. From Mario Fiandella, I learned a lot about teaching. I mean, I had some teaching experience beforehand. Mark had a way of helping you learn how to translate that into helping the community college student in particular. The ability to understand where the students were, and that while the syllabus requires certain things, and especially in the sciences, that the focus was always try to pick them up where they are to get them to where they need to be. Certainly, working with the likes of Connie Quinlan and Rick Eschholz as colleagues in the science department, and John Alberghini as well. Learned a lot of the ropes from these guys. They had started out, as high school teachers, and then came to the community college system well into their teaching careers already. And they had figured out things about, adapting the science and the art of teaching to the classroom structures that we would have here. For other things, how to make your way about and survive in the system in general. We had, if I remember correctly, the first employee of the college was Fred Ramey, division director of business. And, I served on some committees with him, and in his occasionally gruff but generally kind manner, I learned a lot from Fred about what was regarded as mission, of the college and the like. So, I could go on. I've had the good fortune of working at the college long enough to have seen what the founding fathers of it stood for and did, and have seen, what's happened since then, of course, with our tremendous growth.
Can you recall any funny stories or anecdotes from those first couple of years?
Well, my first actual day at the college, not the interview day, but now it's fall. We're having our opening meetings. Notably, the Faculty Senate meeting is one of the big parts of the opening 2 days of meetings. Here am I, wet behind the ears, pretty young guy, 27, 28, I guess I was at the time. And I'm walking into this Faculty Senate meeting, and on the very first day I'm at the college, there is a vote of no confidence being taken against then President Ron Dennison. What have I gotten myself into? I don't really want to be associated with one side or the other at that point, because I don't know anything that's going on. And also, I don't know which side is going to win. And I don't want the other side to hate me immediately on the first day. I abstained in the voting, but I found out a lot on that very first day about where the college was at that point, and the tensions that existed between a virtually recently accredited union and a management that at the time was, I learned a bit on the autocratic side, as it turned out, and learned where the genesis of the union's formation came from. And, within a very short span of time, after learning these things, I did join the union and have been a strong advocate ever since.
Now, what changes have you seen at the college in the 35 years or so that you've been here?
Well, the most obvious would be our physical plant itself. Certainly the new buildings, the new construction has, when you couple it with the technological advances, has tremendously changed the way we go about doing things. But there's also been a huge shift in our clientele. It used to be that the average person demographically who came to the college was 28, 29 years old, female, and was seeking to begin a career, often after some time at home. And in general, the average age of the students, male or female, was quite a bit greater than the average age of the students that we're serving now. That makes some differences in the way you teach because people of different ages have different learning styles. The non-traditional student, who was our traditional student, often tends to be less of a memorizer and more of an apply lifelong learning type skills, more of a process person, because that'll be the strengths of the older learner in many cases. It's not universal, of course, whereas the younger student will often try to rely more on a memorization strategy. So that, and the nature of the way you approach teaching, and sometimes with the younger learners, convince them that the true learning is not what you memorize, but the learning of the underlying ideas, that becomes a little bit harder sell to the young learners sometimes than it did to the non-traditional, older student. Certainly we still have students of a pretty good range of ages, but we have a lot more of the student who's just coming out of high school now, I'd say.
Reflecting back on your career here, what are some of the things that you're most proud of?
Oh, I mean, I guess what I'll look at the end as the major opus is about 8-10 years ago, taking the introductory chemistry course and really changing it from the way they'd ever been taught before. Going to a system where instead of long 3-hour lab once a week with repetitive trials in the experiments and somewhat heavier number crunching that would go with that, to redesigning it to sort of a 3-hour block of which half would be lecture, and virtually every day of the course you would do some lab work, but of a shorter duration and very integrated with what you were immediately doing in the lecture stuff. I think this has made, for students who might not have ever taken chemistry before in their life, a much more accessible, a portal into chemistry for these students. Coupled with now about 6 or 7 years ago, with my daughter, an art major now at U of H, who did her associate's degree in visual fine arts here. She did the illustrations for a lab manual that I put together for that course, and have made it a project to get printed and bind that lab manual for 120 students a semester at no cost to the students, taxing our copiers a bit, but it's been a labor of love assembling that and saving the students about $100, because that's what lab manuals tend to go for, and they don't tend to do all the experiments out of them anyway, but not mine. They do them all. Other than that, really, I've taken the ball. Showed up virtually every day since the day I got here. What's a sick day? Be there, prepared every time, on time. Let's get it done today. And taught a lot of overloads. It's my hope to say that by the time I do retire, which I hope is not another maybe 5 years, possibly a sixth, that I'll have gone down teaching more credits than anybody in the history of Connecticut higher education.
Now, as I recall, during the yearly awards ceremony, you often do a chemistry demonstration. Could you briefly outline that?
Well, let's say it starts with not all poetry is the spoken word or the written word. Steve Strait does a wonderful thing each year where he takes a poem written by the poet selected as the Outstanding Poet Award, and honors that student by reading a poem that the poet has written, and it's a beautiful moment in that. And I thought, well, that's a beautiful moment. We should have something like that with the sciences as well. Can't quite do it the same way because there, at our level, isn't a research project particularly being done. But maybe we could just show the crowd out there that there's a beauty, that there's music in the spheres when it comes to science as well. And so I've tried to select a couple of different demonstrations where I could carry part of it, and the student receiving the Outstanding Chemistry Award carries the other part of it onto the stage, and I will transfer something to the student's flask, step back, very much try to get out of the way as the student has the center stage for that moment. What the heck, I had it all semester, really. And perform something visual. Once or twice we did something that was a little bit on the too messy side, and one of the prior deans raised an eyebrow at that, although others said, well, good for you anyway. But just something with some color change. I figure it's better than the one that would fire the rocket toward the back.
If you were giving advice to someone who had just been hired to begin their teaching career at the college this coming fall, what would you say to that individual?
Preparation is everything. And then I'd repeat it.
Anything else you'd like to add?
It's been a great ride. I came here in '77. It's 34 years now. I've had a lot of fun with it. I've had the honor and the joy of seeing one of my daughters graduate from the place, of getting to announce her name, and saying thank you to my colleagues in doing it as well. Somebody once asked me, how do you keep it fun and fresh all these years? And I said, well, think about it. If you were a stand-up comic and somebody had a gig where you got to do it for 40 years, write your own scripts, be the star of your own show, there are a lot of guys in the Borscht Belt who'd kill for that gig. It's been a good gig. I've had an awful lot of fun with it, and I hope I've helped a lot of people.